meet once a month, which is usually the second Monday of every month. The first Monday of every month, also in this room, is a designer meetup for WordPress. And the fourth Monday of every month is the regular WordPress meetup, if you want to come to more than one. As far as meetups go, there are also, okay, I'm going to make sure I can get to a huge list of other places if they're regionally closer to you. There's a North San Diego County one. There's a Pasadena one. There's a couple in LA. I know I'm just breezing through them. Topanga Canyon.
Venice, I think, has one.
Venice has one. Hollywood has one. But yes, the Inland Empire one. So they're everywhere. If you can't get enough, or again, you want to find something closer. Let's see. Let's start with. Okay, so here's the meetup. Obviously, you found that. If you are not part of the Facebook group, feel free to request to be let in. Everybody's chiming in all the time on here with just WordPress questions. Things like, who has a good plugin idea for this? I have this error. Does anyone encountered this before? Just go in there. You're going to get 100 answers in no time. And about 3 or 4 of them will be good answers. I kid, of course. It's actually a lot of good information, and a lot of smart people are in there answering questions all the time. So it's a great resource if you get stuck and you're looking for friends. So just go in there, request someone to let you in, and you'll be let in no time. Also, a shameless plug for WordCamp Orange County, which is coming up June 7th and 8th. So if you enjoy the meetups and you want a hyper version of that for a weekend, we recommend you come to the WordCamp, which is very exciting. It'll be about $40. Not about, it actually will be $40. It's going to be 2 days, so Saturday and Sunday. We're going to have, Saturday will be the usual not long, exciting, lengthy day. We'll have a lot of speakers and topics then, and then Sunday we'll do a similar thing, but a little bit shorter because we'll have been up too late on Saturday night. So we'll start at 10 instead of 8. Tickets will go on sale on the 7th of May at noon. Last year we sold out, and this is not bragging, this is just to let you know, we sold out in under 3 hours. So if you do want a ticket, please get on the 7th at noon. That's why we put the time. Last time we just put the day, and we did it at noon, and a lot of people went to lunch, and they came back, and we were already sold out, and we got a lot of angry emails and tweets and whatnot. So be ready. Mark your calendars. It's gonna be good. Although we do have more tickets this year, so that's exciting. That doesn't mean wait. Still get them soon. Okay. Also, if your name is Nathan, you should probably submit a speaker talk. If you would be interested in speaking at WordCamp, we do have a speaker submission form. One thing I will say about this, a lot of times this can be intimidating for a lot of people, but we're not necessarily looking just for experts in WordPress and WordPress fields. We're looking for people who've had experiences that they can share and relate to other people. So a lot of what the WordPress community is just giving back. So again, you can be a very new person, but you worked on this website, you had these problems, and you want to share that with someone else so that they don't make the same mistakes. That's as valuable as Nason coming in and telling us all about what he's been working on for the last few months, which is interesting to a certain set of people, but might not actually be as useful to the grand scheme of the WordCamp audience. So, if you'd be interested, please submit something. We would love to consider your application.
What if you don't have a WordPress org username?
You should get one, but you don't have to have one. You can just put in there don't have or knucklehead.
The reason it's up there is because the system automatically links to your profile. It's supposed to be more recognition from you when you post your topic.
It takes 10 seconds to make one.
Yeah, it's super easy and it's free. So.
It is free. It's not that hard. It just makes it easier to put you in the system.
Actually, it's smart.
No, it's fine. We welcome that. So.
Yeah.
Also,
they'll make you show up really easily when you search for your name in WordPress in Google.
Oh, that's the truth, man.
I mean, yeah, WordPress, and it's really helpful. Yeah.
See what happens when you're a smart ass.
Yeah.
No, it is useful. Favorite plugins, it's fun to see what other people's favorite plugins are. Also, the Friday beforehand, Brandon is organizing a golf tournament which is a separate thing from the WordCamp. Yes, it will be part of the whole event, but it is a separate paid thing that will just go through him. It's not actually part of the foundation or anything. But if you would care to hang out with us on Friday, sort of golf, best ball, and even that's very loose. We did it last year. It was very fun. So if you're interested, that's a good way to spend a Friday before the WordCamp. Plus, you'll get to meet a lot of the other people that are going to the WordCamp in a setting that's a little less formal, so you can just kind of chit-chat and socialize, which can be nice. Make some friends before you even get to the event. Okay, any questions about WordCamp? Good, okay. Tonight we will be talking about Vagrant, and Dave's on his number 3 of his Dave Talks, which this one's about JavaScript, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, I'm very excited about that one. I've enjoyed all of his talks so far. But before we get to the presentations, one thing we do like to do is pick our topic for next month so we know what we're going to be talking about. Hope we can get some presentations ahead of time and we're not just doing it last minute. So before we go to the list of all the ideas that we have, are there any issues or burning questions anybody has right now that we can address next month? Anybody stuck on anything? Anybody want to learn a particular aspect of WordPress or productivity in any way? Yes.
Well, moving the whole cycle of starting, with the HTML page and then making it a WordPress site and then putting it up on, say, a dev site and then moving it to production. So the whole cycle.
That's a good one. So the whole production development cycle, I think.
Yeah.
That cool with everyone? That's actually a good topic. That's something Brandon and I have been wrestling with. Because we're always trying to update how you get a site from your computer to the live setting without putting mistakes up for everyone else to see. So that's good. Okay. I will make a note so I don't forget. And then we can listen to the beeping in the meantime. Excellent. Thank you for this.
Also, I've been studying Suzy, and I probably, like to learn more about that. I've been training
I
up.
don't even know what that is.
Is that a CSS framework?
The SAS framework.
SAS.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it SUSY?
Didn't you post?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to find someone to present on
It was a
that.
YouTube one.
Is anybody
have a
familiar
lot
with
of
this?
advantages over the other.
You are.
Yes.
Would you care to present next time?
Would love to.
All right. Look at this. Look at the community working as it should. Okay. So I do see a couple new faces. So generally, we do go around the room really fast and just kind of introduce ourselves. Just give me your name and a little bit about what you do with WordPress or an interesting fact about you or something like that. But we'll start with Brandon on the right side, even though I know everything about him.
I'm Brandon Dove. A third of the organizing people work in Orange County and co-organizer of this event tonight. I'm a WordPress developer, and we have a commercial plugin that we sell for ad management. And yeah, I think.
Great.
I'm Greg Franklin. I'm a WordPress developer also, and I work with ServerPress. We make a product for desktop server that makes it easy for you to build sites locally, and we do kind of do the whole circle of deployment, build deployment.
Sorry, Dave.
I'm Dave. I'm another software engineer, WordPress developer type. I build web applications and e-commerce systems for WordPress.
We'll move up the row here to this guy who should probably submit something for.
I'm Nathan. I'll currently be submitting something for WordCamp Orange County. Don't know what yet. You want me to know that too?
No, we can talk about that. You have a couple weeks to decide.
Okay. I'm a WordPress developer, build sites for clients, and specialize in membership sites and custom plugin development.
I'm David Arsenault. I maintain a bunch of WordPress sites and developed a bunch, gave me some plugins.
Sorry, I should have done this ad row, so I'm going to go this way here and then sweep back.
I'm Ken Choper. I'm a WordPress developer. I've been doing this for about 6 months or so. Yeah.
Excellent.
Hi, I'm Victoria, and I work for a company that does websites for dentists, doctors, and hospitals and clinics. We have about 1,000 clients, and now we're thinking of migrating to completely WordPress. We used to do websites, HTML, and CSS, and we've started migrating some of our websites, and we have like less than 10 right now, so we migrate all our stuff. And I'm looking to meet a lot of developers and see if locally we can outsource this. Because right now we outsource to India and to outside US, and I find that very frustrating. So yeah.
You'll find a lot of commiserating on that. All right, so real quick, if you're a developer, raise your hand. Identify yourself. All right, so you have some choices tonight. Names and numbers. Yes, sir.
And I'm the cheapest one. My name's Ross. I'm a website developer. I have a nice day over there. I work with Steve Wiedemann on the SEO meetings, so that's the thing. And I'm a website developer. I also work with membership sites, nonprofits, that kind of thing.
Very good. Yes, sir.
My name is Leo. I'm the creator of the Genius Track. I just funded on Kickstarter yesterday.
Congratulations.
I'm moving or migrating my website to WordPress, so it's still in research phase now.
Okay. We'll go second row.
My name is Mari, and I've been pretty active on my Facebook group, but this is my first meeting. I finally got away from my kids, so I'm happy to be here. So now I'm a developer. I was an engineer for 12 years, and just trying to get back to my programming roots, which I did in college.
Very good.
My name is Justin. I'm more of a designer.
Fantastic.
My name is Jacob. I have a business background, but I started interfacing with a lot of developers at work. I realized, hey, I really like this stuff. So I've been trying to transition to the development side of it.
Very good.
My name is Paul, and I've just been getting my hands dirty with WordPress for the last 9 years. Every time I got someone to pay me for it. Stop doing it for myself, though. I don't think myself very well.
Priscilla?
I'm Priscilla Christian, and I'm the Empress of Priscilla Christian Graphic Services. And I do lots of different WordPress-ish things, but I'm not a programmer, but I figure stuff out and I push it around.
Very good. Yes, sir.
Jeff Dangle, do .NET, PHP development, new to WordPress, and so first time here.
All right, welcome. And I compliment you on your first name. It's a good one.
Yes, I noticed that. There aren't many of us around anymore.
No, it's definitely gone out of fashion.
The dying breed. Try being George. It's even harder. My name is Rusty. Well, my real name is George, but I'm a programmer. I spent a lot of years writing routing software, all the Cisco systems and that kind of thing. Found WordPress a little while back and got excited, and here I am.
All right, very good.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Mike. Most of you guys probably know me as Shredder, and I work with Dreamhouse on various WordPressy things like Dreampress and also in Core.
Jason Tucker, a WordPress developer for a nonprofit. I also host the Baby Water Cooler show. We do WordPress water cooling stuff, so make sure you go check that out. And I'm also streaming this live, so if you're horrible at taking notes and you want to watch this later, go to ocwp.org if you want to do it.
Hi, my name is Shirley. I've been on TV. I'm an engineer and designer. I mainly work with small businesses and nonprofits.
Very good. Dan?
Diane Developer is a project manager for Craft Favorite, and I'm not a developer, but just trying to expose myself to the real world to facilitate the flow of my projects.
That's much appreciated.
I'm always have time to learn WordPress and what the design should use. I'm at the point that I feel that what everybody gets in half an hour, years.
All right.
I'm Diana, I'm a digital marketing consultant, and I'm just trying to stay on top of all the changes in the WordPress world.
Very good. My name is Jeff. I work with Brandon. Obviously, I help with Orange County WordCamp and this meetup. One other thing, we have prizes today. To the first person who says they need, does anybody need a Cisco router? Is this useful to anyone?
No, I have too many. I'll sell you.
Yeah, not you, but you maybe remind me.
Wireless too, or is it?
Yeah, I think so.
I just got rid of them.
Yeah, it doesn't show any wires on the picture. Yeah, it's wireless. Wireless in. It's 802.11n.
Yeah, I can always use toys.
All right. Yeah. We have a winner. Congratulations. I know. Yeah, because we always have extra stuff lying around.
Always leave now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to give you Dave Arsenault. We're going to learn about Vagrant. Okay, you need just this bit, right? Not the dongle.
Jack, is there a Wi-Fi?
There is. I think it's Zeek Guest is the network, and the password is Zeek, Z-E-E-K, all lowercase, no spaces.
Front already.
Just an update on the fire alarm beeping. I was told, it should be fine, don't worry about it.
And then smoke you smell?
That's right. Yeah. Just go to the work complex.
Going to have a bit with slides and a bit of a demo. Can you turn off the lights, please?
Nice.
I'm David Arsenault, one of the two Daves here tonight.
We're Dave Shorter.
Yeah. Yeah, Margowski.
Dave Short.
So
You're short of Dave. I'm short.
you're starting to get into WordPress. You've got the daunting task of figuring out how to get your environment set up. So what are you going to do? You've got lots of options. So amazed. Wow. When I started, there weren't a lot of options. This was early 2000s. I rolled my own. I had to work on a Windows machine, get it similar to the dinky Linux shared environment, shared host that I was on, and I learned a lot, broke a lot of things on my computer, but I got it working. And to a beginner, it's a lot of work figuring out what version of PHP do I need, what's Apache, how do I install these things, where do I get them, what do I do to get MySQL set up on my machine, lots of questions. So there are prepackaged versions of these available for you to drop on your computer and go. MAMP, WAMP, XAMPP, even desktop server, which is based on what, XAMPP? XAMPP. these take the hassle out of getting set up, and they make a lot of decisions for you. So they do not necessarily match what's on the live server you're trying to replicate. Like where does it put files? You may need to go look up something in the .ini files. Where is that? If you put it together on your own, you know where this is. Not so much with the prepackaged stuff. So it's already there, but the potential for mismatching your live environment and having access to answers to the questions you might have just aren't there. And recently, the hip thing is virtualization. You're hearing about things in the cloud. Well, you can take the cloud and put it on your own desktop or laptop. You get a self-contained server environment that matches what's out in your live server on your desktop. And still, if you're getting into it without knowing what's what, you've got the daunting task of rolling your own. You got to get VirtualBox. You got to make sure it's got an appropriate server software package, and so on. Well, this process has been tidied up and put into a nice, neat script in the name of Vagrant. So Vagrant relies on VirtualBox. Well, this approach to Vagrant relies on VirtualBox. Vagrant works with a lot of virtualization providers. As long as you have VirtualBox, VVV will work. And I've got the steps for installing it down here. And on the various sites, you've got ready to download packages, install them and go. Not a lot of setup involved with either of them, unless you have Git helps to set up SSH. But Vagrant has a lot of that built in for you. And now the main course. Varying Vagrants is a project started by 10up, which is a company that has made a lot of WordPress plugins and themes. And they've released this to the community as its own project. So it used to have a 10up repository. That GitHub URL used to have 10up in that. And in January, they switched it over to its own community. Now, Vagrant was a Ruby project where you do stuff with gems. That's all been tidied up and put into a standalone installer. It's got a package that checks for whether your system has an SSH client and all that. So you install Vagrant, then you go to the GitHub page and download the appropriate release for VVV. It's already zipped up for you. And there's beginning to be a cottage industry built up around Vagrant. So I'm going to show you today some of these helpers. So there's Vagrant has a plugin system. It requires that you have another plugin that'll check for, but this VV guest I find very helpful because it helps keep your box up to date with the most recent VirtualBox integration software. And I'll show you two examples of site bootstrapping. So there's one that's a drop in and go, a bunch of files that you have to change a few lines in. It'll build a site for you. Then there's the site bootstrap builder, which, I've got a typo, which automates this process for you. Where's my mouse? I've already navigated to where I have Vagrant installed. So every time I go here, I make sure it's up to date. I've got the Git version, so it's a Git fetch and the Git pull. Already up to date. And to bring up Vagrant, it's a bunch of commands using Vagrant as the prefix, so I'll show you an example of bringing it up, provisioning, and shelling into it, the SSH command.
Can I ask a question while we're...
Yeah.
So are you on a Linux host with a Linux guest?
Yeah, my laptop is running Kubuntu. And this bearing vagrants gives you an Ubuntu 12.04 machine. While we're waiting, I'll show you the ingredients list. So here's what you get when you go to the GitHub page. You get 3 different versions of WordPress installed for you. So you've got 2 flavors of the development version. You've got one pulling off of Subversion, which is the WordPress main repository. You've got a version pulling off of Git, which the WordPress Foundation is switching to. And you've got the current stable version, which right now is 3.8.3. And you've got a whole bunch of other tools that help you develop or serve your install. I use WP CLI to manage my WordPress site, so I've turned off the auto update for plugins and the base install, and I use a script that uses WP CLI to do that. So I can have a chance to test on my own local machine and push live.
So yeah, why do you choose to do that for minors?
The update mechanism has me give my password and open. I haven't actually tried the new auto update feature, but the other click to update mechanism, it asked me for my local machine's user account and password.
Oh, in theory, I mean, we can talk about this after or whatever.
Yeah.
In theory, you should only do that if the permissions don't quite.
Yeah, I have a separate web user for all the Apache files that were on my live machine.
Okay, yeah, there's probably a way to get work around this stuff. So you could do it for the stuff you don't care about.
Well, I found a way to script it so it's not even a problem.
Do you do all your development on Ubuntu?
That's what I'm aiming for. I've in my own private site, I've got something on a DigitalOcean, which has a bunch of cheap VPSs, and I've got something on Ubuntu. So VVV was right up my alley, and as for my laptop, I put different Linuxes on here every half a year or so. I'm playing with Kubuntu. this happens to be what I have.
It's not Ubuntu, it's Kubuntu?
Yeah, there are a lot of derivatives off of Ubuntu. So this has KDE as its window environment. Ubuntu has their own weird Unity. I don't happen to need it.
You're not wrong, it's pretty weird.
Yeah.
And isn't Ubuntu a derivative itself? Isn't it based on Debian?
Yeah, Ubuntu is the child of Debian.
Oh, Linux is derivatives of derivatives.
Yes, derivatives.
Yeah. It's interesting to trace the family tree.
Just download BSD, you're good.
I try to put PCBSD on here, but it doesn't like the graphics. This has NVIDIA, and they don't. That's for another time. So here, I've been going through this list and figuring out what each piece does, why is it there, and trying to build it into my own workflow. So some of these are command line tools like your get, your subversion, @grep, PHP unit. You have everything here you need to develop on WordPress core. This is made by a company that employs a lot of WordPress core developers, and they use these items in their daily life. Like ngrep, what's that do? That grep is a search utility. The N means it's a network search, so it looks for all your web requests, dumps them out for you, and says, these are the requests your browser's making to the web server. This is what your web server's giving out. Now, back to here. My Vagrant machine is already back up, and it asked me for my password because it modified the host file. So this is a convenience that I like a lot. Instead of having to go and edit some file in some directory, this already makes it so I can go to http://dev. Oh, it's dev. And this is the default screen. I haven't touched this much because every time I try to update with Git, Git complains and says, you've got modified files, so I don't touch it. But you get a window into what PHP is doing, which right now is not very much because I just brought this thing up from sleep. But you've got PHP myadmin there, so you can take a look at your databases. The defaults are supposed to be root for the username and root for the password for your MySQL. So it's not exactly like a live environment, but it's not letting me in. The WP user, what's it complaining about?
You're logged into it.
Well, why isn't the database up? Make sure everything's working before I get here. Then it breaks. Well, I'll show you the helper scripts and hope that what they do will bring the database back up. I'm going to show you the BVB site wizard. And what I'm going to show you is a modified version. I've got a couple of pull requests in with the main site, and I've added some convenience features. So we got the commands. You can make a new one, delete one, or see what's already there. So we've got these various sites, and 3 of them come out of the box. One is the demo, and one is a copy of a site I'm working on right now. So I'm going to make a new one. Let's see, good domain. This is OC WordPress. Meetup. If you're wondering what I've gotten that gives me the windows, this is Tmux. So we're starting up a new machine. There's an error. I'm doing a provision step, which will bring up the machine and also check that everything's up to date. So you're seeing all the updating steps. Right now it's bringing up Composer to bring up a WP CLI, and it's checking for grunt and all that, just zoom past. There it's doing a WP CLI, and it's pulling from the GitHub repo. So you've got the very most recent WP CLI, so you might get some bugs there. Since this has development versions of WordPress, you're going to get some of the more cutting-edge features. With the 3.9 release, they're switching to a different way to access MySQL, because they're making it so it works better with PHP 5.5. They're not necessarily going to require PHP 5.5, but you'll get less deprecated notices in your logs whenever WordPress tries to access MySQL. So there it did an SVN and a Git update of the various WordPress development files. And here it will download the latest version of the WordPress install for stable. And it's about to ask me for password. I'll have to change my password. And here it just made a new database, new site for can't see what I'm typing. OC Word.
I don't think we put .dev on that. Just give it a .dev in there.
Go back 5.
No.
Oh, the VVV script didn't like that there was a slash here. So the demo crashed, but let's go to Vagrant will set up a directory that's shared between your local machine, your host, and the guest on it. So you can work on the files as if you're on your desktop already. And here's all the stuff in here. So PHP's running. Yeah. So this file is some htdocs. No, it's not. Well, since the screen is small, you've got 2013 in ultra narrow, and you can see that I built this back in the 31st of January. Oh, I'm also in Vagrant. So this, in your VVV directory, you've got the www directory, which is the shared one. So I can make a file there, and it'll show up right there. So if you got a text editor on your PC that you really like to use, like Sublime, that's Mac. You can edit everything on your local machine, and it'll still load up in the VM. And the other example I'll show is this VVV init. Let's say you're working in a team, you've already established a site, and you want to share it with other people. You can just say, here's a zip file with these 3 files in it. That's all you need for the Vagrant's auto init script to work. Everything starting with the VVV. So there, Vagrant looks for the VVV looks for this host file, reads it, and will update your local host file. So it'll add on VVV demo. Again, it's also stock WordPress 2013, but this was constructed by the script. And this the script will make the database, add the user. The WordPress install is already pretty quick, but this makes it even quicker. It's as long as the script takes to run, you've got a site. And this checks that the site is not already made, downloads everything for you using the WP CLI command. Any questions?
Does that include the current local database? Like, Okay, so you're using those 3 scripts, but you haven't provided them up down to the database. For example, if you need like,
For sharing sites that are actually there, I don't have anything that's clean enough to show you. It's got work-related stuff, but I can show you what I have off the record. And you may have heard of the new hotness, Nginx. It's another web server that takes a different approach to handling web requests and serving out pages. And the WordPress Foundation, well, Automatic, has embraced Nginx. So WordPress.com is running Nginx. And this Vagrant gives you an Nginx install. So a lot of the magic, a lot of the heavy configuration is in an include. And all you have to have are these, there are 3 lines inside the server block that actually do anything. And that's all you need to do once you get the groundwork laid for WordPress install. And the immediate difference between Nginx and Apache that you may notice is there are no htaccess files that you can edit on the fly. Every configuration change, you have to restart the server. So Nginx is not suited for shared host type work, but it's definitely ready for use on a server that you're in full control of. So to share a site with people, you need at least 3 files in a subdirectory, and varying vagrants will recognize that and cook up a WordPress site for you. And this was did I already close my presentation? This was that file. So it's on GitHub, you can fork it, play with it, you got it. And this concludes my presentation.
That was easy. Thank you, Dave.
Oh, lights, please.
Sorry, I'm drinking my drink. Just in case you need to wet your whistle.
I need the germs.
That's true. You get that. But there are some germs. Trust me.
Or you get my germs.
Are you ready? And do you need my computer? Okay. I don't. If anybody needs a refreshment, there are drinks in the little fridge here, and there's also a fridge in the kitchen if you just go around, which include both soft and beer drinks. Okay. Please feel free. They're on Steve.
It doesn't feel right digging into it with Steve not actually here to...
He would want us to drink his beer. And if Suzette is watching the live stream, hello Suzette. I'm not sure how many weird alerts or anything going up on you. Okay, you're all set, man. You already get one.
Where did you find I can't share that.
Data. To be engaged.
That's why we're laughing in the back, I'm sorry.
Oh, Easter eggs.
Same So, I emailed today about something that he did a flash or something.
Yeah, hello, please.
Take a last today, okay, somebody that's posting something on it. Yeah. Keep busy. I could see the heat. Pretty deep. Right. All right. Nice talk. Right.
So, maybe what we are trying to do is get the local we have them ready for years. Yeah, Russ. So you're George, but Russ. It's a story
Some lady that can't heard You're not talking about Sarah. Started working. Okay, I was like, did she did run it? I was like, yeah, I'm just pretty sure she used to run it.
You know, that's a good question. That's something that I've been trying to figure out. When you say tool, no, actually, great question. So, the environment that I come from, you know, sometimes you don't program. Recently, I started.
I mean, it's very LA. You did it at the same time, but
You start doing it a lot.
I guess actually it's
Still
once you know enough people,
not enough, a lot more.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine. I really can't. So I'm not hoping to. It's a really small.
Yeah, I think so. All right, folks, we're gonna get started again. We've got Dave number 2. If you haven't seen, you were here the last 2 times. Dave's been giving us tips on how to speed up our very first time with PHP, and then we did MySQL, and now we're using JavaScript. If you haven't seen the previous 2, I recommend you go watch Jason's videos. These are posted on our website. Both of them are incredibly insightful and useful, and pick up good tips for making your stuff much better to coder. All right, so JavaScript.
Could you hit the like, please? Thank you. All right, so yeah, JavaScript. I don't know. I I hear from a lot of people that they don't understand it, or they don't like working with it, or they just don't get it very well. I'm going to run through some things. I'm assuming that you know some JavaScript. A lot of what I'm going to cover isn't really WordPress specific. You're not going to see any calls to the WordPress core because JavaScript runs in the browser, not on the server, so there's no WordPress running in your browser. So we'll start with some general performance tips. First thing to go and think about is when you're defining variables, you want to use local scoping as much as you can. I have an example in another slide or two that shows you what I mean by local scoping. It's just a faster way to get at the data. There's a with operator that's built into JavaScript, and that can actually be dangerous. I'll give another example of that. It also has a performance hit. It's kind of slow. DOM updates are a really big thing. If you're changing the content of your web page, a lot of times this will cause the browser to refresh the page. And so you want to do that. If you have to do that, you want to do that in a way that the browser doesn't have to do that update repeatedly. So you can be smart about it and help things out. And another tip is to use changing of classes as opposed to modifying the style attribute via JavaScript on your various elements. Changing styles is a lot better. It also allows your designer and your JavaScript developer, which are often two different people, to be able to collaborate on those styles that are being used. If your JavaScript front-end developer starts making changes to styles, those aren't going to be supported by the CSS, and that can cause problems between various elements of your development team. When you are using jQuery, the first half of this talk is on JavaScript in general. The last half is on some jQuery tips. But when you are using jQuery, you want to use a specific selector. You don't want to just say, hey, give me, I don't know, all of the div tags, because there's a lot of div tags. You can narrow the focus, and I'll show you some examples of doing that. Another tip is to organize the order of your tests on a long, complex if-else structure. You want to use the tests that are going to be most commonly used at the top, so that if they're met, that code is reached sooner and is executed, and the rest of the tests are ignored. And so you can see some speed improvements with that. And probably the thing that a lot of people don't even think about is the use of the eval function. Eval is evil for a number of reasons. One being security, because you can get anything running in your JavaScript code that way. But the other is it can't really be optimized, because the JavaScript engine has to look through that code, parse it, interpret it, and run it every single time you call eval. So there's no way for it to optimize it. So diving right in, concept of scope. Scope is basically the braces that are around the variable that you define. That's the scope. So here on the first line, we have a global variable. That's outside of the scope of a function. That's going to be available for any function. They can all access the global variable. Inside the function, you've got a local scoped variable to the function. So this variable will not be available in a different function, only within this one. This variable here on line 6 is defined within the braces on 5 and 7. So once you exit the braces on line 7, the variable is not accessible anymore. This is a closure function, and it's defining its own variable. Within the closure, you have access to the function variable because it's in the outer scope. It's up here. But it is accessible in the inner scopes within that set of code. Once you exit the closure, it's no longer available. So why is scoping important? Any variables that you're referencing inside this closure function that's essentially 3 levels deep inside of your code, it's going to look within the local scope first. If it doesn't find the variable, it looks in the outer scope. And if it doesn't find that variable, it looks in the global scope. So think local, and then a little bit further out, and then global.
Each attempt to find that variable and then go to the next outer scope takes more time. So the more local variables you're using, the faster JavaScript has access to those variables, and it doesn't have to continue looking in the outer scope and the global scope. Feel free to ask questions while I'm doing this. This is interactive. If this is confusing, just let me know and we'll try to get to some more detail.
I have a really quick question. So is every outer scope that it has to look an equal performance hit versus a global scope? So in other words, if it goes to inner scope 2 and it has to look at inner scope 1, is that lesser of a hit than if it has to go and look at a global scope?
Whenever you're going to global, that's the third level, and so that is going to be a bit of a performance hit. So your variable in here is your most inner scope in this code example. This variable out here is your next outer scope.
Right.
Any code inside the closure that's going to be referencing the functions variable, that's going to take the hit from not finding it within the closure's local scope because it has to go to that next outer scope.
Right.
So that's only one level of hit. If you have function or variables in a different function, those aren't even going to be found. They're only within the scope of that other function. So it's not like it's going to be looking in other functions.
Okay. So if you're inside the function and you have to go to a global scope, is that step from going inside the function, the inner scope, to go into the global scope, is that massively evil, or is it the same evilness of going from,
It's about the same level of evilness.
Okay, I got you. Okay. I got you.
To use your term, yeah, it's just there's not three scopes between the function and the global scope. There's only the two, the function and the global.
Okay.
This inner scope within the closure, that's a third level of scoping. So there's really only the three levels of scoping.
Great, thanks. That makes sense.
Okay.
That middle one says closure, bar closure.
Yeah.
Does it have to be unique? Can I make that as a local variable and call it global bar, let's say? Or do they have to be unique in JavaScript?
It does not have to be unique. Anytime you say var in front of it,
right,
it's creating a new variable. Even if there's a name,
the same as the global one.
Even if there's a name variable with the same name in an outer scope, it creates a local one. If there's no var, then it thinks that you're referring to something in the outer scope. If it doesn't find it, it will create a local. So using var, you're forcing it to always create a new variable.
Even if it's already declared on the outside?
Every time. It's going to be creating a new variable. Even if there's something else somewhere else. Yeah. Okay. But that's dangerous.
Yeah.
Because someone else coming in and looking at your code, they might think, oh, there's that other variable. I heard of that one. He means that. And you don't. It can also cause performance issues. I'll get to a little bit more on that later. But there is some other performance issues that can come into play with that. Yeah.
Is there a way of measuring, this? Is there some kind of
measuring the performance of the code?
Speed, can you determine
what's
faster and slower?
Yeah. There's some more slides later on, and they have links to some tools that you can use to find performance. So we'll get to that. That's a great question. You always want to know how to measure how fast your code is running.
Okay, another question, I'm sorry about this. Yeah. What about just define the length of it? So like right now it says bar, closure, bar, what's the length of those variables? Would there be a way to, let's say I want a one character field. Do I want to declare it as a one character field or just make it unlimited?
Variables in JavaScript are untyped until you give it a value. So if you give it a quote, X quote, right, it's a one character string. Okay. If you give it a 12, it's an integer.
Okay.
You can give any variable name any kind of a value, whether it's an object, an array, an integer, a string.
Okay. Does it ever change after it's been instantiated?
You can change it. You can say this variable is a string, and then 5 lines later you can say it's an integer now. So it's loosely typed is what that's called. PHP is the same way. You can assign a variable an integer, and then later it's an array, and then later it's an object reference. But there are performance hits in doing that, and I'll get to those examples in a little bit too. Okay, so one of the things you want to do when you can is if you're going to be referencing the same type of element multiple times, especially within a loop. So if inside your loop you're saying document get element by ID, and then again document get element by ID, document's a global variable. And it's one of the things defined by the JavaScript language. But accessing that global variable, like we've just learned, takes more time because it's global scope. So a little trick you can do, especially inside loops, is assign it to a local variable, and then use that local variable instead of referencing the global document variable.
Would you define that outside of the loop first?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, because otherwise you have the assignment inside the loop as well.
Yes, so you do the same. Got it. Okay.
Similar to that, we have deep object references, and by that I mean I have a collection and there's an index on that, and then there's an object within that, and then the name property of that object. That's getting pretty deep. All those indirections, those arrays and objects referencing other members and properties, that can take a lot of time. So a similar trick is to take that third level, that person object, and assign that to a local scoped variable, and use that to get the other properties from that object. That'll save you having to look through those collections and the indexes and everything multiple times. This is the with control structure. Basically what it's doing is it allows you to do some shorthand. If you've got this kind of a structure and you want to shorten your amount of code so you don't have to type all that out again, you can say with and all this stuff that basically references everything up to this point. And then within the braces of that structure, you have access to those properties. Now you might think this is a good idea, but it can be dangerous, especially because JavaScript is very loosely typed. If you're referencing a property that doesn't exist, so a prop3 value of the index object, if that doesn't exist within your with and you assign it a value, that's a local variable. It's going to go away once you exit the with. So instead of using with and possibly reassigning variables that you're not sure about, it's usually better to ignore all that and copy that into a locally scoped variable and reference things off of that. There are also some performance hits on using with, because there's some overhead in creating that. And the code structure down here is more optimized. The compiler can do things with that are a little bit better. The for in structure, it's a looping mechanism. It's kind of like PHP's for each. That's also expensive. If you need to use that structure, you can. It's not that bad, but just know that there's a little bit of a performance hit when you're using that. There are some other structures, however, that do kind of similar things, and those you want to avoid. The for each in structure is deprecated, so you don't want to mess with that one because it's going away. For of is not very widely supported. I think it was Safari's browser. It does not support this code structure. So if you start using that in your code and somebody using Safari is trying to visit your website, they're not going to have a good day. There's a concept of a live collection. If you use the get elements by tag name function, that's going to give you an array of all of the div tags within your web page. And that sounds great. You can go in there and do things with it and append new divs, but this piece of code here is actually an infinite loop, because every time you modify the DOM structure and you add a new div, this variable, this value, my_divs, that's returned from the get elements by tag name, is live. You add something to the DOM, and that's going to be added to your list. So every time you're adding something new, you're adding something new to the list, and it just keeps growing. So this is very dangerous. You need to know that this is something that is going to be modifying underneath you outside of the code you're writing. JavaScript itself is extending that array. Reflow. This is what I was talking about as far as changing the DOM on your page. There are a number of things you can change that cause reflow. And what reflow is basically your browser redrawing everything on your page. Sometimes it doesn't look like it's taking as much time as others. If you're just changing one div a little bit and it causes another div to not be able to fit on that row anymore, you might have to move it down. That's going to be a much more expensive redraw because now you're moving things around, you're extending the length of the page. There's a whole bunch of things that are going on. So there are ways that you can do your updates and make changes to the DOM that are more efficient. And they still trigger a reflow. You're not going to be able to avoid that, but you can make it do one reflow instead of more. And here's an example. So if we want to add a bunch of LI elements to a UL element and build a list dynamically within JavaScript, you can do that. This piece of code here doesn't append child. That's going to add that LI to the UL 10 times, once for each iteration through that loop. So that's 10 reflows. The second example here is you construct a string. Strings are still a little bit expensive, but they're faster than reflows. You build all your LIs into a string, and then you do one update instead of 10. Now you have one reflow, redrawing all of your web page instead of 10. Any questions? Make sense?
Yeah.
When you're working with classes, JavaScript is nice because it's object-oriented. But there are, I don't know, 3 different ways you can define classes and objects in JavaScript. And some are better than others. Using the function method and assigning your method name as a property of this, whenever you create a new instance of that class, it's going to create a new copy of that function because you're telling it to right here. You're doing an assignment. You're creating a function, a copy of that function, each time you create an instance of that class. Rather than doing that, you can use prototype. That defines one method that's going to be used by all instances of that class. So it's much more efficient. You're only using one definition of that function. Now you could use that to your advantage because different classes can have different methods assigned to them. I've actually done that on a couple of projects, especially when you're overriding someone else's JavaScript code. You can do it, but you need to be aware that it's creating more copies of functions for every instance of that class that you're creating. Internally, JavaScript creates its own class representation. And what that means is you can create an object with 2 properties, an X and a Y, and then write some code to create a new instance of that class. And then because JavaScript is nice and loosely typed, you can say my second point object now has a Z property. I'm going to set that to 55. Internally, JavaScript has a representation of this point class. As soon as you do this, it has to create a second implementation of that class internally. You don't see it. It's doing it internally. But now there are 2 declarations of that point class because one of those copies of that point object has a different internal structure. What this means is when your JavaScript is trying to optimize things, it's not going to be able to because you're writing your code in a way that doesn't allow the optimizer to do its thing. So to prevent it, always declare your properties of your class in the same order and use the same types and order of the variables as you can. And that will allow the optimizer to do what it wants to. Makes things more efficient. Similar to that, you have array representation. There are 2 different ways that JavaScript will internally create an array. One is using what's called a linear or compact set of keys. So, array of 10 elements starting at 0, ending at 9. That's a linear compact set of keys. And the other is similar to PHP's arrays, where you can use named properties within the array. That uses a dictionary or a hash table. Hash tables are going to be slower. The compact key type of array is much faster. So when and where you can, try to use the compact keys. When you're building your arrays, you want to use contiguous keys whenever possible because of that. And you don't want to be deleting elements within the array. That would also possibly have JavaScript have to redefine that class that it's using to represent that array. So here's an example. On this line of code here, you're assigning X to a new array. So JavaScript is going to assume that you want a compact key set array, and it's going to build one for you. You come along and you assign the first element to a number, or an integer, I should say. The next is also an integer. On this line of code, though, you're assigning a numeric. What that means is JavaScript has to say, okay, I'm not doing only integers in this array anymore. I have to change its type. I'm going to rebuild this array so that it can hold integers or numbers. So it rebuilds the array. And then on this line of code, you're assigning something that is not an integer and not a number. So it has to rebuild it again so that that array can hold anything. So those two rebuilds actually take more time. Rather than doing that, you can do it all in one line, and the JavaScript engine, when it's evaluating that line, it sees and knows right away that you have a loosely typed array, and it's going to set things up the first time so that your array can hold any type of data. This is what I was talking about on the first slide, about your long if, else if type of structures. Try to move the tests that are going to be happening the most often to the top. So as soon as you find a test that is going to be evaluated as true, it's going to ignore the rest. Otherwise, it's going to have to look through all of those. A lot of programmers like to organize those lists logically as opposed to in priority order, because it just looks better, or it reads better, or it makes more sense. But you want to do as much as you can to help the code. Really, the programmer is secondary.
Does the same principle apply to the case statement?
Cases are actually run slightly differently. A lot of times cases are more efficient than a long if, else, if.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. I've heard mixed reviews, and they've also improved the efficiency of if-else, that long if-else structure. So I think the case is still a little bit faster, but testing is going to show you really the most. So when we get to the slide, we'll show you how to do. You can do the performance testing. You can use those tools to find out for sure what your code is going to be working.
I mean, they tend to try and prefer to use the case statement over the.
I do too. I think it looks better.
Yeah.
For one, but in a lot of cases, both in PHP and JavaScript, the cases are a little bit faster. So your browser actually has a compiler built into it. And in Chrome's case, they have two, because 2 is better than 1. Chrome has a general purpose, pretty good compiler that's really fast, generates pretty good code, and it has another optimizing compiler that is slower, but it generates really good code. So on a hot function that the JavaScript engine finds that you're calling repeatedly, some little piece of code that you're running a whole bunch of times, once it sees that you're starting to use this a whole bunch of times, it'll run it through that highly optimizing compiler and try to get a better copy of that function so that your JavaScript runs better. It's kind of neat. But there are some things that that optimizing compiler just won't do. One of those is the try-catch. It's a really helpful structure, but the optimizing compiler can't do anything with it because it just the unwinding that throw is just not something that it can optimize well. So if it notices a try-catch inside of a function, it will never try to optimize it. The way to work around that is to put your try-catch outside of the function. Now it can optimize this function safely if it's going to be used a lot, and it doesn't. You don't have to worry about it having that try-catch within it.
Does that mean you want to push your try-catch out to the outermost scope that you could? Or
Probably not, because you want to catch it at a point that makes sense. If you're waiting for the outermost scope or the outermost caller, you might be catching it too late.
Okay.
One of those other functions might be more appropriate, but just know that that function is not going to be able to be optimized really, really well.
Right.
It'll still run, but if it's a function that needs to be super high performance, it will never go through that highly optimizing compiler. When we were talking before about changing the class by adding a third property to that class, that's another thing that optimizing compiler doesn't work well with. So this last bullet item is addressing that. If you're going to be creating classes that are going to have changing properties, that's another thing that your optimizing compiler is not going to want to work with. So just keep those things in mind. Try to write classes that are not going to be changing that much in their structure. So again, try-catches can't be optimized. If you write a function and it has a couple different parameters on it, and you call those with integers a whole bunch of times, and then you start passing strings into those same functions, you can do that because JavaScript is loosely typed. But as soon as you do that, if JavaScript had created a highly optimized version of that function, it has to throw that away. Because only the slower code from the normal optimizing compiler, the non-optimizing compiler, can handle that kind of polymorphic parameters of that function. So you're going to be wasting time building that optimized version only to throw it away because you're passing different types of data into a function. So try to keep the same type of data going into a function. And also, very large functions will not be able to be optimized very well. So try to keep your functions small. That's usually a good rule anyway in software development. You want to keep the functions into logical working groups. Okay, now we come to jQuery. Can't really talk much about JavaScript without talking about jQuery. And especially since it's used with WordPress, it's available, so a lot of developers use it. But something I found out during the research on this presentation, the way that jQuery does its selector search is not very intuitive. If you've got a fairly typical looking selector that looks like this, we're trying to find a div with an ID of content and all the paragraphs within that. That's not how JavaScript, or jQuery rather, actually satisfies that request. What this is doing is it's first going to build a list of all the paragraph elements within your page. Then it goes through that list and it discards all of them that do not have a div with an ID of content as a parent. So it builds that big long list and then it throws a bunch of stuff away, and that takes time.
It does it backwards.
Right. Now there's a reason for it, because it's using the get elements by tag name function. That gets it a list of all those elements that are a P. So that's a very quick core function that's built into JavaScript, and it'll do that, but then it goes through that discarding process to find the selector that you're looking for. This piece of code, however, does the exact same thing. The jQuery function takes two parameters, so you can use that to your advantage. The second parameter is the scope. That first part that you see in this selector, you can tell it, I want to narrow the scope of the selectors that I'm looking for by this value. And then it's looking for only the paragraphs within that scope. So instead of building a list of everything and then throwing a bunch of stuff out, it does it the other way. So you can force it to go left to right instead of doing it by default right to left. On some browsers, using the find jQuery method will actually work better, because this is going to give you the content div and then finding the first paragraph within that, done as a separate step, can actually be quicker. I'm glad you asked. I think that's on the next slide. Again, with the selectors, you want to be as specific as possible. I see a lot of people doing class name, which is pretty normal, all divs with this class, but there's no core JavaScript function that does anything with classes. What jQuery has to do is build that list with the get elements by tag name first, get all the divs, and then look at each div and see if it has the class that you're looking for. So rather than using classes as selectors, use IDs. Because there's that get element by ID, that core JavaScript function, that it can use to find that selector. And that's really fast. Rather than building a list of everything and discarding stuff, you zero in on the one thing that you're looking for.
Well, that seems kind of weird. I mean, it almost seems like a deficiency in Java, or jQuery rather. Because I think people use class names way more than they use IDs.
They do, because you're only supposed to have one ID of that name. It has to be unique.
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but they want to use classes. That's fine. For CSS, it works great. Right. But if you're writing jQuery code, there's no core JavaScript function that helps them find classes. They have two functions.
There's a query selector method now.
Okay.
It codes up what jQuery does. I haven't seen what jQuery does now, but I believe they.
Okay, so if that's supported in your browser, jQuery is probably using that. But if it's not supported in your browser, if you're using something old, then it's going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. And there are really only two tools it has to do that: the get element by ID and get elements by tag name. And then it has to go through that list to find the elements with the class that you're looking for. So whenever you can, try to use a class, an ID, to help JavaScript know what elements you're looking for.
You know, I would just default to using classes all the time, and I never really had a definitive reason to use IDs until right now.
Okay. But the other thing is, if you do something like, I don't know, you want to change a CSS property, and you're doing that on a class, if you use something like this, jQuery div.className, and then you do a .css or something and change that, you're not changing on just one thing. You're changing it on every single div that has a class of that name. So it's doing a lot more work. If you're only trying to do it on one element, you'd have to add a first in there. So it's your jQuery selector first, then CSS. So those are more function calls and more work in order to zero in on the one element that you want to be changing.
So I guess the important part there is that you pre-think your development so that you're sure that whatever
have a plan.
Style
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing. You want to almost plan out at that point. Okay, I know I'm going to be affecting this. I might as well use my ID.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you don't want to come up, 3/4 of the way into it and go, oh, no, I'm going to do this.
I think you probably want to do both though, because you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into having used IDs and then style it that way, and then you realize you need to use those same styles elsewhere. So we can still use classes for the styling and then IDs for the JavaScript.
I'm not talking about styling. With styling, yeah, you want to use classes, because when the CSS rules are applied and things are rendered on your page, classes are much more useful for that. Right. But when you're writing jQuery code and trying to zero in on a single element with that class name, that's actually a slower operation. If you can and use an ID as part of that jQuery selector, then you can find the one piece within the DOM that you're trying to address, instead of maybe inadvertently addressing everything with this jQuery call.
But maybe what Jeff's saying is you're hedging your bets to some extent. Because maybe if you're being a little more agile in your development, if you use an ID in a class, they're not going to conflict even though you're using the same identifier. And then later you can come back and optimize by.
And you don't have to have CSS rules for all of your IDs.
Exactly.
You can just do it on classes.
We don't want to do standard by class as much
Right.
as possible. But again,
then use jQuery selectors by ID. And
right. I'm saying, when I'm coming up with my plan ahead of time, when I'm writing the HTML structure, I'm going to be trying to give everything in a class and an ID. So when I'm going back, if I need to plug anything individually,
Right.
and JavaScript.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that guy doesn't run that.
Another thing you need to understand is how the selectors work. Just like when I was first pointing out that the selectors work right to left, what this selector is doing by operating right to left is it's first building a list of the entire DOM, looking for that first attribute. And then it throws things out that don't have the class assigned to that element. So that's going to be a much slower operation. This is better. It's still doing a slower lookup looking by class, but rather than saying every single element on the page that might have this first attribute, I only want the elements with this class, but the first one of those. So this is actually faster than this kind of a jQuery selector. So here's the answer to your question about which browser does these selectors differently. Here I have essentially the same operation. I'm trying to find the paragraphs within a div, an ID. And this is how quickly it runs on a Chrome version 33 machine. They'll do 52,000 operations doing it this way. Do almost the same thing. Well, no, it is the same thing. Maybe that's a typo. But it was close between these two selectors. But using find to get just the paragraph elements within my div ID, that it's able to do 62,000 times per second. Now, this is the results of a test that are on this page. That's a link. You can follow that if you want. What really surprised me on this is some of these other browsers and how slow they're actually running. Chrome Mobile is a dog. 6,000 operations to do this piece of code. Your iPad, 28,000, and Opera, 39,000. So Chrome is by far the winner on all of this. Firefox was just a little bit slower. This was 66,000. I think, if I remember right, Firefox was something like 59 or 60,000 operations per second. So Firefox and Chrome are pretty close. But this brings up a really interesting point. You can write some really efficient JavaScript and jQuery code for a browser, and then next month Firefox comes out and their browser doesn't work well with that version of code. On this page, they actually have a graph of all the different browsers and different versions and how fast they run. And there was a point in time when Chrome was running faster and faster and faster, and then all of a sudden it dropped down in half. They did something to their JavaScript engine that caused this piece of code to execute much, much slower. And then they come back. They do some optimizations and more changes, and their browser is now working faster than it was before. But the point is, the browser is a moving target, and it's not really something you can control. When you're writing PHP code, that's running on your server. That's something you can control. But you don't know who's going to come by with what version of browser when you're looking at jQuery. So it's actually a lot harder to do jQuery and JavaScript optimization because of that. You don't know what your customers are going to be using. So you want to write something that's good across the board, or if you can, focus your development for one browser and tell your customers that that's the preferred browser. But then, 6 months later, Firefox can come out with something that's much faster, and you might want to rethink things. It's something you just need to be aware of. The different browsers behave differently, they perform differently. Again, when doing your jQuery selectors, using a tag is going to be faster than classes. I was saying before that when you're saying I want a class, it has to get all the elements and then throw the ones out that do not have that class. Because it can't use that get elements by tag name function that's built into JavaScript. Here it can, because you're giving it a tag name. So it knows it can start with a list of the anchors and then narrow that down by ID. So that's always going to be better than having some anchor with a class of the link and trying to find it that way. Another thing I see people doing a lot is they just use that jQuery selector over and over and over and over again. Every time you do that, jQuery has to go and figure out what that selector refers to. And so it builds that list and gives you that list. So what I see some people doing is they build this into a global variable is still better than having to call that jQuery function over and over again. But if you're doing object-oriented code, you can put it into a class variable. And then the scoping is a little bit better. But you can reuse that over and over again instead of asking jQuery, where is that selector? And that's especially important if your selector is going to be returning more than one item. If it's going to be returning all of those paragraph tags, you're looking at a list of things that jQuery is working with, not just one element on your page. You can also do function chaining. So this is what I'm talking about. You do your jQuery call and you find your ID, then you tell it to change the CSS setting for the color. And then you do the background color, and then you do padding, and then you set up a click responder. This is the same code. You do your jQuery select, it finds that element within your DOM, and then you call the CSS method again and again and again. So it doesn't have to go through the work of finding those elements from your DOM over and over again. You're using that one collection multiple times instead of asking it to go find that collection multiple times.
So it doesn't have a magic caching element to it?
No.
So you used it once and it assumes that you might use it again?
Well, yeah. And if you're going to, you should assign that result set to a variable.
Yeah. Actually, that makes a lot
Yeah,
of sense.
that's how it's designed. So if you want to or need to do something with that multiple times, it's up to you. But I see this happen again and again. People kind of get lazy. It's very easy and convenient to say jQuery, #ID. It makes sense, and it just kind of rolls right off the fingertips onto your editor. But this is inefficient because it's doing this lookup through your DOM. And again, if it's a very inefficient selector, then that's going to be an even greater performance penalty. So doing this function chaining helps you because it reduces the number of times it has to go find that list of elements. But the CSS method itself, you can pass it an object and create an object on the fly and call the CSS method once instead of 3 times. So just knowing a little bit more about how you can use jQuery, you can optimize this first piece of code down to something like this. That's the jQuery selector call and then 2 method calls. So it's a lot less overhead. So rather than changing the class that you're using, or rather than changing the styles by setting your style attribute, it's better to change styles. Because here again, you've got a designer or someone who's going to be building your HTML and your CSS. And then you've got some UI person, a front-end developer who's writing JavaScript and jQuery code. Unless they're really working closely together, you can get problems where your selectors aren't really working because you're overriding the styles. A style attribute is always going to take precedence over a class that's defined in CSS. So whenever possible, you want to remove a class from an element and add a new one, rather than changing the style attribute of that particular element. So here's some references for a couple of websites that you can use when you're building your JavaScript code. This one shows you, it lets you run code under a performance analyzer, and it shows you the timing results. So if you want to check out if your long if structure is going to work faster than a case, you can use some of these tools to do that. There's two different websites here. This one has more discussions on how JavaScript works and performance tuning of JavaScript. And there are also some other tools. There's a lint tool that you can use for JavaScript. It'll tell you things like you didn't initialize that variable correctly, or some scoping might be confusing. Lint tools are really useful for that sort of thing. And also, when you're building your JavaScript code, making it small by minifying it reduces the amount of time that your browser has to take to download that JavaScript code. So especially when working with large libraries, minifying your code can save latency, bandwidth, time. So you can use those kinds of tools if you want to do that. And then there are these other books. Nicholas Zakis, he's one of the front-end developers at Yahoo and knows a lot about JavaScript. He's written this high-performance JavaScript book, and I believe he uses a lot of those techniques and ideas in the code that he's writing for Yahoo with their YUI library. And that's all I have. Any questions? Is Brandon's falling asleep?
No.
No? Oh, okay.
He's absorbing it. I have a question on the.
Sure.
I'm running a website for these tools, and Google has this optimized speed tool, and it always says like, put your JavaScript on the bottom. You know, at the bottom. Now, is that what we should do to make it run faster?
That doesn't make your JavaScript code execute faster, but it makes your web page look like it's loading faster.
Oh.
It's still going to be downloading every one of those scripts, every one of the CSS files. All of that content has to be downloaded. But by putting it at the bottom of the page, when the browser is loading your page, whenever it gets to a JavaScript reference, it stops. It downloads that reference, runs that code, and then continues. So if you have a bunch of includes of JavaScript up at the top in your header, it's got to download all those files before it even starts displaying the body of your HTML. So by putting those JavaScript references at the bottom, your HTML loads, a bunch of stuff is going up on the page, and stuff is below the fold, and that continues to load, and your user doesn't know. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. It doesn't help the performance of the JavaScript code when it's running on your site. It just helps the performance of the page load.
Even with the document ready, it still loads, right? When you have it on the top, you wrap it with the document ready, it's still going to load it, it's just going to wait to run until after.
Exactly. But it has to stop the rendering of the page to download that file, see that there's a document ready, and say, okay, I'll call that when I'm ready, and then continue. And the other thing is, with CSS, you can get some performance advantages because you can say, load my CSS from a CDN. So it's not off of my same web server. So your browser can open up another connection to a different server and start downloading stuff from different points. With JavaScript, again, it has to stop. Even if you're loading from different servers, it has to stop and run each piece of JavaScript code one by one by one because of the way it wants to run JavaScript. It's just the way it has to run because one piece of JavaScript can depend on another piece. So it has to do each of those individually. That make sense? Any other questions? These are good questions. Anything else?
Define this presentation. Where was this at now?
Oh, let's see. Command Shift F. It's on my website. You can go to davejesh.com/presentations/js-optimization.
And if we go to just presentations, do we see all your other estimates?
I don't remember if I set that up. I think I did. But I didn't add this one to it because I just finished it over the weekend. So thanks for the reminder. We'll have to add that to the list of presentations. So yeah, these are the others. these are some of the other presentations I did on PHP optimization and SQL optimization. So if you want to go and look at those, you can. But I'll add the JavaScript. Thanks.
You're talking about those tools to measure the performance. JSPERF?
Yeah, JSPERF.
So that is a website that you just go and input your JavaScript, and then it gives you some kind of
In your own browser, you've like in Chrome, you've got the developer tools, and they show the waterfall graphic, the chart of what's going on and what's taking up.
That's how the load times, though, right?
It's also showing execution.
Execution too.
Yeah.
JavaScript.
Yeah, there's you've got all the various tabs. So you've got the network tab, it shows its own waterfall, but you've got the page process tab. So it will reveal.
Yeah, both Chrome and Firefox have lots of tools for examining the performance of your page and things. There was a time a couple years ago where I really preferred Firefox because of its abilities with JavaScript. And I'm finding Chrome is catching up or exceeding them in a number of ways. It's getting lots and lots better. But they're both improving their tools all the time.
I like the Firebug on Firefox.
Yeah.
But I'm using Chrome now. But every time I have to do some testing, and I always go to Firefox with the Firebug. Is there like a Chrome version of Firebug now that's you have like an inspect element and really cool stuff in Firebug?
That's built in.
Firefox is that?
Yeah.
I really haven't seen it. That could be another topic, but.
Yeah, no, right click on your element.
Yeah, I don't know how to right click on it, but I don't see it. That's like I'm used to Firefox and Firebug, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so here's your JavaScript console. You can use a console.log function call within JavaScript, and whatever you put inside that, whatever you pass to that function, it will output to this console. So you can use that for debugging, tell it to output the time, and you can see how long things take between certain points within your code.
Right.
When I was building this, I actually deleted about 30 slides from this presentation because it was getting too long. But there are a bunch of tools that you can use for performance timing of your JavaScript code. You can give it a name and then later use that same name, and it uses the time between those 2 points.
Right.
And it'll output a bunch of stuff.
Is that under timeline?
I don't use this much, so I'm not as familiar with this as others might be. Probably need to reload this page too, since the inspector doesn't always know that it's running.
Hit the record button on that.
The what?
The record button on that.
It's the solid circle.
circle.
Ah.
It will track basically the timeline of what you're doing.
Yeah.
So if you have an application that is performing some JavaScript animations or whatever, this will keep recording until you tell it to stop. But you can mouse around, you can do whatever you want, and it will like you see the blip on the memory at the bottom there. And you can kind of see start to right at the timeline of the little pie chart. You'll see like the 2 little, I think they're green or something. Yeah, those things. That's when you roll over the link.
Oh.
It will show you.
Yeah, because it's got to show that link mouse over text and stuff.
Yeah, so it'll show you the link, the painting thing, it'll show you
the reflows,
memory, all that stuff. Yeah.
Cool. All right. I will turn it back over to Jeff.
Real quick.
Yeah.
How do you do your presentations online? That's really cool.
Oh, I'm using a theme.
Oh, and it's built into that.
Well, I have a theme on my site, and then when you go into one of these presentations, it uses a different theme for just that presentation. So you see this parameter here? That tells it to use this different theme, and then that loads up all the slides and goes through some stuff.
Oh, so dynamic themes, is that what you have?
Yeah. Yeah, I use a different theme on some pages, and then the main theme on the rest of the stuff.
Really cool. I like when you do that, like the presentation.
Pardon me?
Is that theme or a template?
It's a theme. I'm running multiple themes on this website. And that theme has its own template pages, yeah, but I'm using multiple themes. And I have a plugin that I use to tell it when to select theme 1 or theme 2. I just set that up so I can easily set up multiple presentations.
That's how we call him a wizard. Thank you, Dave. All right. Are there any final questions or anything? We're getting close to the end of time. We always like to give you some extra time to canoodle and talk and look for developers.
Yeah, to take everybody's names.
Remember next month, Paul is going to show us SuzySAS, and we're going to find someone to demonstrate production from local to production, which is a terrible phrase. We'll find a better phrase before next month. We don't know who did that yet, but we'll find someone. Again, come to WordCamp, so if you enjoyed this, again, WordCamp is very similar. It's not as brain-melting all the time. There are some lighter topics. But it's also important to know what you don't know and the places you can still climb to, so that's good too. The other thing that's nice about WordCamp too is you don't come to it at the end of a workday, so you're already kind of tired. You wake up, we'll give you some donuts and some coffee, and then you can go into it, we'll give you lunch. Oh, yeah, $40, you're going to get lunch Saturday and Sunday and a t-shirt. So that's $40 alone right there. Whether you learn something or not, then don't worry about it so much. That's right. So thank you all for coming. Well, hopefully we'll see you next month. And again, hang out and chit-chat for as long as you like or until we kick you out. Now, also, sorry, a lot of people like to go drinking at the House of Brews afterward. So if you would like to do that, it's on